The biggest mistake I see is not that people spend too much money on their gardens. It is that they believe a beautiful garden has to be expensive before they even begin. Every year I watch good wooden boards get burned, old buckets get thrown away, cracked flower pots end up in the trash, and rusty watering cans disappear because someone thinks they have no value anymore. Then those same people walk through a garden store and pay more money than they planned for decorations that often look the same as everyone else's. I used to think exactly the same way until one season when I simply decided to stop buying and start looking around my own yard. That decision changed not only the way my garden looked, but also the way I enjoyed working in it. I discovered that the most interesting decorations were already waiting for me in places I had stopped noticing years before. An old wheel, a broken chair, a pile of bricks, even a dented metal bucket could become something that made visitors stop and smile. Nobody taught me this in a book. An older neighbor showed me years ago without making a big speech about it. He simply pointed at a pile of things that everyone else called junk and quietly said that a garden should tell your story instead of showing your wallet. I never forgot those words because they turned out to be true every single season. The funny thing is that most people still make the same mistake today. They rush to buy expensive decorations before they even understand what makes a garden feel warm and welcoming. They fill every empty space with something shiny, but somehow the place still feels empty. There is a simple reason for that, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. During this video, I want to show you how I use ordinary recycled materials to create decorations that cost almost nothing, but bring life and character into the garden. None of these ideas require special skills or expensive tools, and every one of them comes from simple methods that many older gardeners quietly used long before garden centers became popular. The first project surprised even me because I almost threw away the one thing that later became the favorite corner of my entire garden, and most people would still walk right past it without realizing what it could become. When I finally stopped looking at old things as garbage, my whole garden slowly began to change, and the surprising part was that I spent less money while enjoying the work much more. Most people think the secret is finding unusual decorations, but that is not how it works. The real secret is learning to see ordinary things in a different way. Years ago, an older friend told me that before buying anything for the garden, he always walked around his shed for 10 minutes. He said there was almost always something waiting there that could become useful again. At first I laughed because I thought he was just trying to save a few dollars. Then I watched him turn an old wooden ladder into a flower display that everyone admired. It was weathered and imperfect, but somehow it looked more natural than anything sold in a garden center. That was the day I realized that age can actually make a decoration more beautiful. Most people make the mistake of cleaning everything until it looks brand new. I do the opposite. If the wood has a soft gray color from years outside, I leave it exactly as it is because that color blends perfectly with flowers and green leaves. If an old bucket has a little rust, I do not rush to paint it because the rust gives it character instead of making it look damaged. One simple project that almost anyone can make is using old wooden crates. Many people throw them away without thinking twice, but stacked in different directions they become shelves for flower pots, herbs, or small garden tools. You do not need perfect boards or expensive screws. A few solid pieces and a little patience are enough. Another forgotten idea that was shown to me many years ago is using broken clay pots instead of hiding them. Most gardeners throw cracked pots into the trash, but I place the larger pieces around flowers to create small layered gardens with moss stones and tiny plants. Visitors often ask where I bought those decorations, and they smile when I tell them they came from broken pots that almost ended up in the garbage. That is why I always tell people not to hurry when they clean their yard, because the next thing you are ready to throw away might become the decoration that changes the entire feeling of your garden. And there is one object that almost every family already owns which can become the most eye-catching piece in the whole yard with almost no work at all. One of the first things I learned was that the best garden decorations are often the ones that have already lived a long life before they ever reach the garden. That may sound strange at first, but let me explain what I mean. Many years ago, I noticed an old metal watering can sitting behind my shed. It leaked from the bottom and I almost threw it away because it could no longer do the job it was made for. Then, an older gentleman, who had been gardening much longer than I, had looked at it and smiled. He said that a watering can does not have to carry water forever to remain useful. He filled it with soil, planted a few simple flowers inside, and placed it beside a narrow garden path. The flowers slowly spilled over the edges, and before long, that old watering can looked like it had always belonged there. Since then, I have never rushed to throw away old metal containers because they often become the most charming pieces in the entire garden. The same idea works with old enamel pots, coffee cans, kettles, and even worn-out cooking pots that nobody wants in the kitchen anymore. Most people see scratches, dents, and faded paint as flaws, but in a garden, those little signs of age make everything feel more natural. There is another forgotten trick that I rarely hear people talk about today. Instead of placing every decoration at eye level, I like to create different heights around the garden. An old wooden stool can become a stand for a flower pot. A tree stump that seems useless can hold a lantern or a simple planter. A stack of old bricks can lift one colorful container above the surrounding flowers, and suddenly the entire area has more depth without spending any money. Few people do this because they think they need expensive statues or fancy displays to make a garden interesting, but simple height changes often create a much stronger effect. I also learned not to crowd every corner with decorations. Empty space is just as important because it allows each handmade piece to stand out instead of getting lost. Every season I remove a few things instead of adding more, and somehow the garden always feels calmer and more welcoming. There is one recycled material that almost every household throws away every single week, and with one very simple idea, it can become something that surprises nearly every visitor who walks through the gate. The material that changed the way I looked at garden decorations forever was something almost every family throws away without thinking. Cardboard boxes. I know that does not sound exciting at first, but stay with me because this old method has surprised more people than almost anything else I have ever done. Years ago, I watched an older gardener collect plain brown cardboard after every delivery instead of putting it out with the trash. I thought he was saving it for the fireplace, but he had a completely different idea. He used large, clean pieces of cardboard to create simple shapes that became the base for small decorative corners in the garden. He covered the cardboard with barkwood chips, small stones, and pine cones until nobody could even tell what was underneath. The result looked natural and tidy, and it cost almost nothing. That simple lesson stayed with me. Today, I often use cardboard as the hidden foundation for small displays around flower beds or under decorative containers because it helps keep weeds down while giving everything a cleaner look. Most people never think about what is underneath the decoration, but that hidden layer makes the finished result look much better for a much longer time. Another simple idea that has become one of my favorites is using old glass jars. I save different sizes throughout the year, and instead of hiding them in the garage, I place small candles or solar lights inside them. In the evening, those jars create a soft, warm light along a garden path or around a sitting area without needing expensive lanterns. Sometimes I wrap a little natural rope around the top or place a few small stones inside to keep them steady on windy days. The whole project takes only a few minutes, but people always ask where I bought them. The answer usually makes them laugh because they had the same jars sitting in their recycling bin. There's another little habit that many gardeners overlook. I never try to finish every decoration in one afternoon. I place one piece in the garden, then I leave it there for several days before adding anything else. Walking past it each morning helps me decide whether it belongs there or if another corner would suit it better. That slow approach has saved me from making many mistakes because gardens grow and change every season. There is still one forgotten recycled item that almost nobody keeps anymore, and with one small change it becomes the decoration visitors remember long after they leave your garden. There is one thing I have noticed over the years that almost every gardener throws away without giving it a second thought. Old bicycle wheels. The tire is worn out. The bike is beyond repair, and the wheel ends up leaning against a fence until someone finally hauls it away. I used to do exactly the same thing until an older gardener showed me a different way to look at it. He cleaned the wheel just enough to remove loose dirt, but he left all the little signs of age. Then he hung it on an old wooden fence and let climbing flowers slowly grow through the metal spokes. By the middle of summer, the wheel almost disappeared behind green leaves and colorful blooms, while the round shape quietly framed the whole display. It became one of those simple decorations that people could not stop looking at because it felt natural instead of planned. That idea inspired me to try other forgotten objects as well. An old wooden window frame without glass can become a beautiful background for hanging flower pots. A worn garden rake with broken teeth can be fixed to a wall and used for hanging small lanterns or lightweight tools. Even old spoons can be turned into simple plant markers with a little paint or careful engraving. None of these projects require expensive equipment or special skills. They only require slowing down long enough to ask one simple question before throwing something away. Could this become part of my garden instead? Most people make the mistake of trying to copy pictures they see online exactly as they appear. I learned many years ago that every garden has its own personality, and the best decorations are the ones that fit naturally into that space. Sometimes I carry an old object around the garden for several days before deciding where it belongs. I place it near a flower bed, then beside a tree, and later close to a small bench. Sooner or later, one place simply feels right, and I stop moving it. That little habit has saved me from many disappointing projects because I never rush the final decision. The beautiful part is that every season brings new ideas because something that looked useless in spring may become exactly what the garden needs by summer. There is still one final lesson that completely changed the way I think about handmade garden decorations, and it has nothing to do with money or tools. It has everything to do with the feeling people have when they quietly walk through your garden. After all these years, I have come to believe that the real beauty of a garden has very little to do with how much money was spent on it. I have visited expensive gardens filled with brand new decorations that looked impressive for a few minutes, but somehow felt cold and forgettable. Then, I have walked through small gardens where almost every decoration was made from old recycled materials, and I remembered those places long after I went home. The difference was never the price. It was the care and the personal touch behind every little detail. That is why I always tell people not to worry if they cannot afford expensive ornaments, because they already have everything they need to create a place that feels welcoming. One forgotten method that has stayed with me for years is collecting natural materials as the seasons change. In autumn, I save interesting branches, pine cones, smooth stones, and pieces of weathered wood instead of leaving them on the ground. During winter, I quietly think about where each piece might fit when spring arrives. By the time the garden begins to wake up, I already have a small collection of free materials ready to become something useful. Sometimes I build a simple border around a flower bed with old stones. Sometimes I place an unusual branch beside climbing plants and let nature do the rest. The wonderful thing is that the decoration keeps changing as the plants grow around it. Most people make the mistake of trying to finish everything in one weekend. I learned that gardens should never feel finished because every season brings another small idea worth trying. I also enjoy moving decorations from one place to another instead of making something new every year. An old crate that held flowers beside the patio last summer may become a herb display near the vegetable beds next season. A lantern that looked perfect under one tree may create a completely different feeling beside a garden bench. That simple habit keeps the garden fresh without spending another dollar. Very few people do this because they believe every change requires another trip to the store. It does not. Sometimes all it takes is seeing familiar things from a new angle. Before we finish, I want to share the one lesson that has stayed with me longer than any project or decoration, because once I understood it, I stopped worrying about making my garden look perfect and started enjoying every single day I spent there instead. If If there is one thing I hope you remember after watching this video, it is that a beautiful garden is not built with a large budget, but with time, patience, and the willingness to see value where other people see waste. I still smile every time I walk outside and notice flowers growing from an old bucket or climbing through a weathered bicycle wheel, because each piece reminds me that almost everything deserves a second chance. The greatest reward is not hearing someone ask where I bought a decoration. It is hearing them say that my garden feels peaceful and welcoming, because that is something no expensive ornament can ever guarantee. Over the years, I have learned that every handmade project carries a small story, and those stories slowly become part of the garden itself. When friends visit, they often stop beside a simple planter made from an old wooden crate or an old watering can filled with bright flowers, and they always spend more time looking at those simple ideas than at anything expensive. That tells me people are not searching for perfection. They are searching for warmth, honesty, and inspiration they can actually use in their own homes. That is exactly why I encourage you to begin with just one small project instead of trying to transform the whole garden at once. Pick one forgotten object that has been sitting in your shed, garage, or backyard for years, and imagine what it could become with a little care. You may be surprised by how much satisfaction comes from creating something beautiful with your own hands, instead of buying it from a shelf. Little by little, your garden will begin to reflect your own personality rather than someone else's design. Before long, you will start noticing useful materials everywhere, instead of seeing rubbish, and every season will bring another simple idea worth trying. That is the old habit many experienced gardeners quietly shared with me years ago, and it has saved me a great deal of money while giving me far more enjoyment than I ever expected. I truly believe the most beautiful gardens are never finished because every year offers another chance to create something new from something old. And in the next video, I want to show you another forgotten garden trick that costs almost nothing, but can completely change the way your outdoor space looks throughout the entire growing season.